Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the first season of This, That, and the Other. My name is Varun Chandramohan, your host for today. Seated right next to me is one of the nicest people you will ever meet, my co-host for the day, a trainer at Luminary, Ashik. How are you doing? Hey, man, how's it going?
Hi, good to be here. Let's see what's going to happen today because it's a very important topic.
For sure. So for those of you who are just joining us, This, That, and the Other is a series that tackles some of the biggest and most controversial challenges HR and senior managers face within an organization. Last week, we spoke about affairs at work, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This week, we look at side hustles. Is it on when employed? And it's time to introduce our guest. He is a content creator, a celebrated entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, and is currently a board member and the chief growth officer at Surge Global. Bhanuka Harichandra is here with us, everyone. Hello, Bhanuka.
Hey, everyone. Absolute pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Nice to have you. And our next guest is an author of 4 best-selling books, a writer for over 30 publications and magazines, and he's currently the co-CEO of Results Global Impact Consultancy Agency. Kimansi Constable is here with us today. Hello, Kimansi.
Hey, thanks for having me here. And I would say that I'm going to be the friendliest person you've ever met now that you've met me.
All right, it's on.
It's on.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's wonderful to have you both here. Let's begin with a definition for a side hustle. Many think they are having a side hustle, but in reality, all they have is a hobby. What is a side hustle? What distinguishes a side hustle and a hobby? Maybe we can start with Kamansi and then thought on that.
Sure. From my perspective, a side hustle is a business or businesses that you start on the side in addition to your main revenue source. So you could be employed at a company. You could even have a business that is your main business, but then you start something on the side to generate additional revenue. Now, the difference between a hobby and a side hustle is that piece of revenue, and then also how does it fit in with the overall strategy of your goals. So that's what I would classify as a side hustle, because there's a lot of people that do things that are fun, and I know people that have been doing things for 10 years. I'm an author, or I have an internet business, or I'm doing this, and they've been doing it for 10 years, but all they've done is invested money into it and not generated any revenue. So I would not define that as a side hustle.
All right, fair enough. Bhanuka, any thoughts?
I think we're pretty much on the same page when it comes to side hustle. For me, it's really just anything that you do besides your core business or your main line of work that contributes to revenue, which in turn eventually leads to your financial independence or success. So as that revenue component for me is key. It's not necessarily a side hustle, or at least it's not a good side hustle if it's not generating any revenue.
Sure. All right, fair enough. So let's begin with, from an employer's point of view, what does it mean when an employee has a side hustle? Let's dish out the pros, the cons, the dilemma that employers face every time they find out somebody has a side hustle. Or it's not uncommon to find people who have people who do a variety of things who earn an extra income. What are your thoughts on that? And let's kind of dive into deeper issues as we progress along. So Bhanuka, maybe you can take a stab at it, and then we'll move on to Kimansi.
So the way I view it really is like how your parents want you to not spend too much time on your computer. At the end of the day, you don't really have a choice. It's going to happen one way or another. One is you know about it, which is great, or the other one being they're just going to lie to you and say that they're not going to do it. the reason that people get involved in a side hustle in the first place is because of the fact that, you know, that additional income is something that like 99% of the world craves, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. So I'll give you a little bit of an example, right? So my main line of work, I work at a company called Search Global. We are a digital consultancy. We help with customer acquisitions and like all of those stuff. And so in a broader scale, it fits into the word digital marketing, right? The skill sets that we have as a business, predominantly the work we do is really selling people's time for whatever projects that we take on. Now we have, in the agency, we have about 40, 50 people. And typically what we've noticed is that majority of the people that are involved in doing the work together with us are also involved in some sort of side hustle. So the content writers that we have in our business work on freelance SEO projects, freelance content writing. The designers have occasionally built websites for other people. The main reason that we're okay with it is we've also understood that if you are like, as our business, we shouldn't, sorry about that, we shouldn't necessarily feel threatened that different people inside the business are building up their skills and doing other things, because if you were worried as an employer that someone is going to take your knowledge and implement it elsewhere, and that's really the key value proposition that your business has, sooner or later, you're going to go out of business because you're just building inefficiencies up. Now, as much as we endorse people to do whatever they want in their free time, you know, when you come to work on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning till you leave the office, we expect them to work on our stuff. And I think that's a fair expectation. So we don't necessarily see this as a bad thing. Personally, on my end, like I've invested in multiple other businesses. I work with a group of people right now that like out 200, 250 people. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm taking away any attention from the core business that I'm involved in. It's just a way for you to understand more problems, contribute better to society, and honestly, a fun way to kill time. Might as well make it productive as well. So in an overall sense, I view side hustles as something that should be encouraged because, you know, the more financially stable you are, the more financially stable your team is, the better decisions that you can make. And I don't necessarily see something terribly wrong with that.
So could we hear what Kimanzi has to say about it as well?
Yeah, I would say by and large, we're definitely in agreement. So I think we're kind of all in a room here where we agree with each other. I think it's important for a company overall to have that entrepreneurial mindset atmosphere. But I also think there's no easy answers because an employee could have a side hustle that is actually could cause liability to the company depending on what the side hustle is. We know that the internet can be the wild, wild west, and there's a lot of things that could happen on the internet. So if your employee is involved in something that doesn't align with your values or your core message, that is something that you'd want to explore because ultimately when it blows up, it's going to blow up on you as a company. And we've seen examples of this in the media. But by and large, creating that entrepreneurial mindset is going to benefit the company because at the end of the day, if your employee only wants to come in, punch the clock, do exactly what they have to do and leave, that's not going to benefit your company. But if they can understand how to have that entrepreneurial mindset, they're going to come in and treat their job as if it's their business. They're going to be more invested and they're going to not do things like milk the clock and just do what they're going to be leaders essentially. So that kind of environment is ultimately going to help the company's bottom line. And the good thing for companies is that most people are inherently afraid of risk. So I hear this all the time where managers and executives are like, well, what happens if my employee starts a side hustle and then they quit to go do that side hustle? I'm like, in that case, you wish them well because that's where their heart is and that's probably where they're going to go and be better instead of being at your place, not giving you 100%. But most of your employees are not going to do that because they don't want to leave a steady paycheck. They don't want to leave the security in their mind. We've seen now with the global pandemic that security it's kind of not what we thought it was, right? Here in the United States, where I am, 47 million people have lost their jobs that thought that they were secure. So security is not kind of what we thought it was. But most people are not going to leave the security of a job to start a business, which is why they'll keep a side hustle and they'll still be invested in your business. And we've seen glaring examples of this. If you look at the Googles or the Apples or the Microsofts, all of these companies, the Facebooks that have a different philosophy on work, where they allow them to work. They don't have to sit there and be in a cubicle. They can work in any part of the campus. They can work from home. They bus them in, they bring meals. It's a very different environment. The studies have shown by and large that helps productivity and helps the company. So I think it's probably a case-by-case basis, but I think by and large, you do need that entrepreneurial mindset, and it is going to help everybody involved.
Absolutely. So let me ask you guys something. We did get a comment from an audience member, which was kind of interesting, because this particular member mentioned that now not all side hustles are created equally, and I think Kimanzi just touched on that just a little bit. And there was an interesting example this particular person had mentioned, saying if you were a teacher in a school, you'd be off, at least in Sri Lanka, you'll be done by about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the evening, and then you can conduct tuition or give private classes and so on, and earn an extra income that way. But the same cannot be said about a senior manager in an organization who might need to be there and cannot just take off just because it's 5 o'clock, and so there might be a huge conflict there. So maybe I'll go to Banu and ask him, have you experienced the two extremes? Have you bumped into any issues like that, and how did you resolve them? And then we'll ask Kimanzi if he's come across anything like that.
Look, I mean, if you're a senior manager of a company and you're spending your overwhelming majority of your time at work, chances are financially you're well compensated for that. You wouldn't be clocking in till midnight every night as a C-level executive and not making any money. So I think the financial requirement, or at least the necessity to do a side hustle as you climb up that corporate ladder, should theoretically drop. But that being said, I mean, even if you are a senior manager or you have crazy deadlines, the problem that you'd have to face then is you'd have to find and design side hustles which are incredibly flexible. The good thing about as a side hustle, it doesn't necessarily mean a part-time second job, right? If it's something on the internet, there is this thing we use in technology called asynchronous, where you don't really have to follow a linear path, and things can synchronize at different points in time. So if you are essentially in that space, or you will have weird time constraints that are unpredictable, you really just need to figure out how you can allocate your time, where you don't need to say that, oh, my side hustle is going to take from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. That's not always common as well. And especially, it's not like you were working in a business and then you suddenly rose through the ranks to the point of now an executive, versus you had this side hustle for a long time and now they clash. It's usually a situation, if it comes to that, you have to pick one or the other, or you have to adjust one to meet the other one's need. Or typically what happens is, if you are already a C-level executive, you figure out a new way or a different side hustle so that it's in line with your restrictions and limitations of time and whatever resources you're taking to do that.
Oh.
And I would 100% agree with that. And I would say with a side hustle, it's the word that comes to mind with me is margins. So you're learned to work in the margins in your life, because in addition to your work, you also have maybe kids, you have responsibilities at home. I'm the one that cooks in the house, so there's cooking going on, and you have to find a way to make it work. We have a content marketing agency, which is our primary business, but I have a few side hustles that I'm passionate about. Well, what does that mean? It means for me waking up at 4:45 every morning, and to work in the margins and to work on my side hustles, because for me it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like it's something that I'm building. So I think margins is really important, because the reality is you're never going to get a specific allocated window every single day, especially when you are employed, because employment has changed now.
So I'd like the point that you mentioned, Kimanzi, right now, and I think we should touch upon that a little while later. Okay, when it comes to the employee and managing yourself better, right? But right now, I'd like devil's advocate. You did mention in the last session a little while ago that that everyone seems to be promoting or saying okay to side hustles, right? So let me play devil's advocate. Now this is bad. Okay, so if I take that position as an employer, okay, pilferage happens. Okay, maybe I as an employee. Or rather an employer, I feel that, okay, internet is being used, stationery is being used, time is being used, people are being asked favors in office for side hustle. So there seems to be a drop in productivity in my company. Okay, so let's talk from the employer's perspective. It's really not helping me. Now, what's the answer to that?
Yeah, I think the answer is you need data. You can't just make an assumption that it's regarding the side hustle. At the end of the day, an employer might think that it's a side hustle, or it could be something else going on that's a little bit more sinister. Who knows? But without the data, you cannot really make an informed decision as an employer, because at the end of the day, here's the reality for the employers out there. Your employee is going to do whatever they want anyways, whether you know about it or they're doing it on the side, it's going to happen. So instead of it happening in a way that it always has to be on the side, they always have to sneak it in, why don't you find a way to compromise, to find what works for the employee and what works for you, and find where's that middle point there where you can see how this works for everybody involved. Because again, at the end of the day, if you can find a way to get your employee to think more like, not every entrepreneur thinks the right way, but have that entrepreneurial mindset, they are going to be better self-leaders, and it's going to help your environment overall.
And just to add to that, right? So there's also a couple other levels of complexity here, in the sense of, if you are worried as an employer, as the greedy capitalist in me is speaking, the first thing I'd do is, like, more often than not, if a side hustle is happening within your organization, chances are the people that are working inside it are also using the same skills and learnings in the same industry. So try to figure out how to incubate it and make it a part of your business. And because now they're more committed than ever, it'll realistically cost you nearly nothing, because you already have majority of the infrastructure that's needed to do whatever is done. And you now have insane amounts of commitment from the same person who was, like, very disengaged with your organization, now deciding, okay, this is my thing, I'm going to go and do this. And from an employer's point of view, right? Like you mentioned that, okay, what they're using my resources, this is bad, I need to figure out how to stop this. And I'm sitting here as, assume that we're working in the same industry, I'm sitting here as a competitor thinking, this is wonderful. These guys do not have their shit together. How do I figure out how to get all of those talent that's in that organization to jump ship to us? Because all we have to do is say, guys, we're transparent. You can do your own thing. That's not a problem, as long as you get our stuff done as well. And you're now opening up all of these other cans of worms that leaves you in this really bad situation. Because at the end of the day, right, like going back to the analogy that I started it with around, your parents lying, like kids lying to their parents, it's essentially going to be the same thing. One is they're going to build a narrative and tell you that, oh, everything's fine, I'm not doing anything besides your work, and they'll just change the tab every time you get close to them, as opposed to just be open-minded about it, share that information, and just be as transparent as you can.
So, both of you guys mentioned a couple of things that are very pertinent. Superb, yes. But say if you're an employer who's not ready for this, what key things, what few things, 2, 3, 4 things that you need to do to make sure that you have your company ready for something like this? Because you're mentioning of, you're saying that, you need to encourage it, you need to allow it, you can incubate it, or, anyway, the employees anyway going to do it. But say if you're a guy, and we're living in Sri Lanka also, and the rest of the world also, it applies the same. What do you do? Maybe start off points, certain things that you need to do first.
I would say that the free market is not as kind as you think it is. If you hesitate, you will get absolutely destroyed. It's a matter of you figure out how to adapt, or you file for bankruptcy and you walk away.
Right.
And I would say that you have to figure out what your standard operating procedures are going to be, just like you would anything else in your company. So have to come up with protocols for how you're going to address it and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And probably the best way to do that is feedback from your employees. So you might call a meeting. It might be about hustles and what everybody's involved in, and kind of get a temperature and see what everybody's doing, and start to speak with your executive team about put together like what is going to be your policy, how are you going to operate this, how are you going to encourage it, how are you going to discourage certain things that are going to bring liability from your organization. And if you do come up with those standard operating procedures, and they're going to have to be fluid, because entrepreneurship fluid, it changes. It's not the same no matter where you are or what industry you're in. So you have some fluid philosophy, but if you have something in place, then and employees are involved, they've bought into the process, then when somebody is doing something that is going to jeopardize it, they'll kind of self-police themselves.
Well, fair enough. Absolutely. That's just spot on. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're in conversation with Bhanuka and Kimansi on Side Hustle. Is it on when employed? And we're talking about some interesting concepts here, and we are still talking about it from the employee's point of view. And I just have a follow-up to that. Have you ever experienced where an employee helps the client out, and eventually either employee becomes the competitor or the client becomes the employee's competitor? I'm sure in the world of probability that it would have happened somewhere at some point, but any experience? No need to mention names and names of individuals or companies, but if you have come across anything like that, how do you deal with that? Especially, it must be hard as an employer when that happens.
Yes, I've dealt with it personally working with clients where I've seen both scenarios where one where the employee started a business and the employer became their first client. That situation, it worked. But I have seen the situation where the employee started a business and started siphoning off clients on the side. Yes, we're not going to paint a rosy picture that entrepreneurship is great and that it all works out great, because it doesn't. And so, yes, I have seen where they've siphoned off clients. And in every circumstance that I've seen, and most of them have been here in the United States, it's ended up in litigation. So they ended up having to go to court, and they ended up having to do something about that, because when you sign an employment contract at a majority of companies, it's going to be very clear what you're signing. So in that case, it did lead to litigation. But I guess, what can you do? There's not much you can do if that's what the employee is going to do. If you have that inclusive environment, maybe that could prevent some of that. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be bad apples in a bunch. So you have to also be prepared legally with how you're going to respond.
And at the end of the day, right, like it's your job to build a phenomenal business. Figure out how to create as much value as you can to your customers. And if that's the case, for them to, the typical value that a new business or, one of those spin-offs from your company that is competing against you has, is the fact that their overheads are lower and that their it's more often than not a cost decision. So if you can position yourself as to the value that you create and show that, you know, there's a lot more to it, that's probably the easiest way to safeguard yourself, is make sure that your customers see that value in the work that you do. And that's because that's one of those things that, you know, not only will it help in this situation, as a business, you will need it regardless of what you do, whether it's some internal team member that's starting their own thing, or it's a competitor that's starting your own thing, because like the market is so competitive that you don't really have the time to worry about your internal team like trying to capture, because there are tons of other people that's out there to capture your market share. So I feel the attention that's going to this could be better utilized elsewhere.
And I think Monica brings up a really good point. It's almost like when you're in a relationship, when you're dating, you go all out, right? And you do everything you do to get your partner. And then after 10 years of marriage, are you still doing those same things? So as a business, you're doing what you can do to acquire the clients. You might give them a good experience, but are you continuing that same experience that you did when you tried to acquire them? And if you're always dating, so to speak, with your clients, and you're always working on refining your customer experience, over delivering for your clients for value, how could they take your clients?
Fair enough. And I just have a, oh, sorry, Monica, you were saying something.
One quick thing that I thought I might bring up. We had a couple of people in our organization actually, you know, form an agency that is competing against us. So the time to bring this up. Literally word for word, copy on our website, because they know they were there in the process of the amount of A/B testing that we did to understand conversion rates. So they've copied literally the wording on our website to build their agency. The first thing that we got was about 3 or 4 of our customers calling us up and saying, hey, you know, I know these guys because I've been speaking to them, because when we were working together, they just reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to switch over? It's XYZ cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And they just called me to say, look, I'm calling you to let you know we're not switching over, but we just thought we should let you know that this is happening. And I think those kind of situations, like as long as you have that relationship with your customer, like the projects that we do are relatively long term, they're not going to like turn on a dime and say, okay, now this is 10% cheaper, I'm joining that. But it does happen. They were legally violating the employment contracts. We decided to not go into litigation purely because like it wasn't necessarily worth our time, and didn't really see them as long-term competition, or whether there's any sort of thing that they took away from the business. But I mean, speaking from personal experience, it does happen, but at the same time, like it would have happened anyway. It may not. The only difference between a competitor doing that versus your own team or a group of people that were already a part of your team, really just happenstance, and you have to have a personal relationship with them. But that's it, really.
That's actually spot on, because I do know companies, especially in an industry where the margins are low, and you have a wide variety of competitors in the market and competing on price. I've come across many businesses who have told me stories about how they build relationships with their clients, and it's no longer about the price, it's about the values that a business brings to the table, and they do not want to jeopardize that value, and the fact that they've been working with a certain client and they've been delivering, and they do not want to disrupt that. So thank you, Monica, for bringing that up, and that's a fantastic point to take home. I just wanted to remind the audience, they can always send us questions. Do click on the chat box. Do send us your questions, and we'll try and weave them into the conversation. And the second thing is, there's a friend of mine who works for a fantastic company in California, and they did. It's basically a creative agency, and they did post a fantastic blog article about why they support and encourage side hustles within their organization as a part of their core values. And I'd just like to read a couple of lines. And when they asked the question as to what would happen when they leave, and why would you even allow your employees to do that, or why would you encourage that? And they had some there were a few points that they mentioned which I thought was very interesting. They said, for some people, the day job provides the satisfaction and fulfillment they desire. That's it. For others, the day job provides security or confidence that they need to explore a passion on the side. And for some, the part-time side hustle may evolve into a full-time calling and lead them away. And so their approach is that regardless of where the employee falls on that spectrum, it's about finding purpose and meaning in whatever it is that they do, and which I thought was really, really cool, and it resonates with exactly what you guys were talking about. That's fantastic. Let's move on to, from an employee's point of view. Should you? We'll start right at the beginning. It's uncertain times. An extra income might be nice, and if you start something, or if you do have something, should you be open right from the beginning, from the interview stage? Or if you start something during your tenure at an organization, should you walk up to HR and say, hey, or walk up to your manager and say, hey, there's something that I'm doing, I should let you know? What are your thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Baraka.
So the way I would deal with this, right, is and this is very personal, I would be very open. If I was already working in an organization, I would go ahead and tell someone and say, look, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking. Is this okay? Do you have anything against it? And just make sure that there are going to be boundaries between work and the side hustle. If they're receptive of that, great. Occasionally ask for help. If they're like, no, that is not something that we want you to do, then you do one of two things. One is, if you are, if you're not super passionate about it, and you're worried that you might lose your job or something, keep on until you find something that's a good fit. Or two, you are passionate about it and you think it has a shot, then lie to your business. That's honestly what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree that you should be open and honest up front so that everybody understands what's going on. Say, hey, this is my situation. This is what I have going on. This is something I'm passionate about. And if the company responds and says like, no, we don't, we're hard set against that, then you have to make the best decision for you. Because at the end of the day, life is short. It's short, and we only get one life to live. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to live it in a way that is not in line with where you're going and does not feel good to you? And you might be surprised. That company might say, yes, like you said, the company in California, yes, we encourage that. Absolutely, we're behind it. Or if no, we're dead set against it. This is what you're going to do. It has to be this way. Then that might not be the company for you. Yeah,
and those are things that you need to keep in mind when if you get a better opportunity at a different company, it needs to resonate with you. Okay, is this company fitting the values that I embody? And I think that's really important, especially if you're in a smaller organization. The best thing, if you have access to whoever your business leaders are, more often than not, they might be actually encouraging, and not even just encouraging, but they'd help. They'd give you referrals. They'll lead you to referrals. And I think people don't ask that question because there's so much stigma around this topic. It's similar to discussing salary, right? For some reason, and especially in Sri Lanka, you do not say what your pay is. It bothers me to no end. And because of that, like, you make a whole series of bad decisions because no one has access to information.
And in life, there are seasons. So maybe you got offered a really great job that paid a really great salary and you needed it at that season in your life. Well, you say, I'm going to take that great salary and I'm going to take it for 3 months, and that's my window. And once I get to a certain number, then I'm going to move on. So maybe that job that pays well is just the thing it's your investor. It's going to invest in the business or the side hustle or whatever your next venture in life is.
Oh, that's nicely put.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I think that's really, really good. But there's one critical question that we were discussing. We needed to bring out, and it came about quite a bit when we were discussing this.
He's not the nicest guy. It's like, okay, you know what? I take that back. 30 minutes into this, 30 to 40 minutes into this. Okay. Himanshi, the crown is yours.
Okay, so the thing is this, see, is side hustle for everyone? Because see, the things that you've mentioned, okay, it can be something dangerous to actually get involved in if it is not your thing. So as much as side hustles are good, employ you to do it, okay, and something comes by, like Varun just said, okay, something just flew by because of the pandemic and something sounds good. Okay, let's all make sanitizers today. Let's all make masks, whatever it is, right? Are side hustles actually for everyone? Or if it is for you, then what should you do? Like I told you that I'll touch on this subject later on in terms of your management, right? So time management, you get up at 4:45 in the morning. Okay, so I think that's what it takes. For example, is it? So what do you guys think about that?
Bhanuka is like raring to go, so I know like.
I do not encourage getting up at 4:45. Look, and at the end of the day, it comes down to whatever it is that you want in life. If you want to focus time on your relationship, on your family, on your kids, do that. The side hustle thing, and I'll just say this and I'll pass it on to you, is really just about if you think that financial independence is a really important thing and you want to go after that. Because if you are, really well off and you're happy and you're comfortable, congratulations, you don't need any of this. Go do what you've been doing, because if you're not complaining, you've probably done better in life than most people. So good on you.
And I would say that no, entrepreneurship and side hustles are not for everybody. But first, I would say, Varun, if I was co-hosting the show with you, I'd make sure you have some coffee or a drink, and I'd also make sure that you're well fed. So I don't know if he's doing that for you.
I like that.
Yeah.
You are the nicest guy.
But the reality is you have to be very self-motivated in entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
and there are people that's not their archetype. They're not built that way. They need somebody to tell them what to do and how to do it, and they're going to be great once they have the instruction. So no, side hustle is not for everybody. Entrepreneurship is definitely not for everybody. And there's nothing wrong with having a job. Let's say you're in, let's say I worked over there with Bhanuka in his agency, and I loved what I did. I just created content for him and I loved it. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's say that you were, a different profession. What if you were a lawyer or a doctor? Or what if you were a high-level executive at Coca-Cola or whatever? Like, that's fine. You can do that. And if you love that, and that's your archetype, and there's nothing that says that you have to have a side hustle. We're all built differently.
Fair enough.
So possibly another one troubling is, okay, where do you draw the line? Okay, say for example you have gigs. Okay, say for example, most easiest thing is the gig economy. You work a full-time job and then you have gigs. What if it clashes? Which takes precedence? How do you decide? I'm an employee. What do you do at that time?
Yeah, from an individual.
Individual point of view, because most of our audience must be thinking, right? Okay, my boss calls for a meeting. It's clashing. I have something else to focus on. What do I do?
You roll the dice and then you see what the dice says. Don't do that. So I have a friend I have a friend who is an executive with a company in New York, and he loves what he does there, but his passion is food. And so he started a side business where he's catering and he's doing pop-ups and he's cooking and he loves it. Like he absolutely loves it. And it's gotten to the point where his side hustle, the culinary, is actually making more money than what he's doing as an executive at this firm in New York. And so he has that question of, what do I do? I think at that point, it's what does your future look like? You have to decide, where is this all going for you? I think a lot of times we always think in the now, like what's going on now, and we don't think where am I going to be in 5 years, and where do I want to be in 5 years? So if you've gotten to that point where they're kind of bumping heads, you have to ask yourself, is this always just going to be something where I do to make residual income? Because there's people that do that have a job and they might do like a multi-level marketing thing on the side or some sort of internet business on the side. And that's all they want it to be, is something that funds like their fun projects. But there's people that are building a side hustle because they eventually want that to be their full-time revenue. So once it gets to that point, you have to decide, where is this all going for you? What's your life look like? What's the ultimate goal? And then make a decision based off your future, not just your now.
Monica, anything to add on?
What he said. No, look, I mean, that pretty much.
I think you might have been on mute, or we catch that last part, Monica. Would you mind repeating that?
With the expression this time, again. Same thing.
I just said what he said.
Okay.
But honestly, right? Like, the last part really resonated. It's not about now; it's about the future. Just you need to make a call on where you want to lead with your future, and whatever is most in line with that, I'd say just go for it.
All right. So I'm going to ask a question for a friend. That friend is real and it's not me. So what could you do to increase the chances of success in your side hustle? A, and B, when do you know as an individual that it's time to move away, or rather to look at something and be like, in my or kind of decide, okay, this is going to be my life, or is this what I enjoy doing, and how do you decide and take that leap of faith, or is it a leap of faith? Is what I'm trying to figure out.
So for me, right, I don't necessarily see it as a leap of faith because of two reasons. Like, one is we are all at different points in our lives, especially in our financial journey. For you to even be able to take these kind of jumps, like when you start a business or whatever, if you have a financial safety net, the conversation is so much different from someone who has to make sure that their parents are fed every day and making sure you have money to put food on the table and pay rent. And the level of risk someone takes is going to be very different. Right? So that's the first thing. So what is the level of risk that makes sense for you? And as long as you understand that you get so much more clarity, because we can't stay here and talk about how entrepreneurship requires a certain level of risk. And at the same time, being able to take risk is also sometimes a privilege. The second thing is around, what do you want to achieve in terms of financial success? Like, for you to be able to make the switch from steady income to gig income, or like, what is the cash balance you need? What are your expenses? What are your income? Because like, there's technically 3 ways to make money. One is increase your income, reduce the expenses, and then invest the difference. And then the success of that is what's going to help you do that. So a side hustle, it doesn't necessarily have to depend entirely on the side hustle. It could be what are the costs associated with the job that you're doing, and if you can quit that and those costs come down, then it just opens up new avenues, right? So being able to understand that and being able to take control of your time, I think, is the most important thing around a side hustle. As long as you have a general understanding of what those two metrics are, I think you can make when you put those into perspective, you'll be able to make the call.
And I think that you actually have to have a real business. There's a lot of people that have made money but don't have a business. And there's a big difference. Wow. If, let's say, in your side hustle, you had a really great month, it was fantastic revenue wise, and then the next month it was half of that or 1/4 of that, and then next month it was maybe more, and then it was zero. Like, you don't have the consistency there. I've seen people in that situation say after that one really good month, they're like, I'm quitting my job. I'm quitting my job. I'm going all in on this business thing based off of one good month. And then guess what happened? Because they didn't have their structure of their business in place, they ended up crashing and burning. So I think you have to start with, do you actually have a business? Not just have you made money, do you have a business? And do you understand how you're going to continue to build the business? Now, there's two scenarios. So there was a scenario where I had with the client that was a medical doctor. And on the side, he started off with a podcast called Medical School HQ. And then from the podcast, all these people were like, I want to take the MCAT to be a doctor. And people kept asking him, could you put together like a training on it? So he put together a training and it sold out. So him as a medical doctor making great revenue, what he made as a medical doctor. And then all of a sudden his side hustle, which is Medical School HQ, like just blew up. And it was actually making triple what he was making as a doctor. And then at that point, he had a decision to make. Now, he was a single guy, so he decided to go all in on the business, and that's what he's doing today, and it's amazing. Now, when I started, I originally had a service business. It was a physical service business. And I started doing the online thing, so content marketing and that stuff. I wanted to quit to sell the physical business, get out of it, and move on to my side hustle. But I had a family, a wife, and 3 children. So guess what? I wasn't just going to go and I wasn't going to quit, even though the business had generated some revenue, because I knew that it wasn't consistent. So it depends on where you're at, your circumstance. But I think the biggest thing is don't confuse making money with actually having a business, because that decision could cost you.
Wow.
Amazing. I think that's very important to make that distinction between getting money and actually having a business. Okay. The next question is about juggling acts. Okay. So it's like that. You know, how much can your mentor you for? And we know most of the time it's very difficult to do some things or 3 different things or more. How does one do it, and how do people get away with it?
And I'll just add to his question. If your side hustle is quite close to the kind of job that you are doing, would that make it even more harder to focus on 2 different things? Thought that interesting. Thought. Any thoughts on that? Can a person do 2 things? Can a person focus on 2 things? And
yeah, I'll start. I would say
you're all for it. How do you do it?
I would say that you have to have you have to have some organization in your life, right? If you're going to do this, because you want to primarily make sure that you are taking care of your employer and the person that has employed you. You want to give them your 100%. Even though you have a side hustle and you're getting into entrepreneurship, that doesn't mean you just say, forget the job and you don't give value to your job. I think as a person, you want to be the most optimal, best person at everything that you do in life. So you're passionate about your job, but you're also passionate about your side hustle. So I would say first and foremost is making sure that you're giving that 100% to your job, but then you have to have organization. When are you going to work on your side hustle? When does it make sense? Do you have to wake up early mornings, or maybe you're going to do some late nights, or maybe you're going to work on it during your lunch break? Have that. Understand how you're going to structure your days. For most jobs, you're going to be able then to figure out what your days are going to look like. You're going to be able to structure around that. I think the people that run into trouble, it's because they have no organization in their life. One day they're doing this, next day they're doing that. They're not scheduling things on their schedule. They're not utilizing all the different tools and technology and software that we have today to keep our lives organized. I mean, from this little device right here, you can run your life and you can run your business and your job.
Sure.
And so I think it's using all that software and really getting crystal clear on exactly how you're going to organize all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, pretty much, right? As well as depending on your personality, the way you approach it is going to be different. One thing that I've realized is, like, for me at least, I get bored very easily. So it's not that I do two things. There's like, at any given point, there's like 16 different things that are happening. And one of them is interesting for a short period of time, and then you get bored of it and you jump to the next one. But the reason I can do that is because each one of those things has like a group of people. When I lose my excitement, there's someone else to actually catch the ball and do the day-to-day. So you just need to make sure that there's a certain level of structure, and that structure needs to be designed around how you run things and how you intend to run things. And when there's a good match between that, not that I have everything figured out, but like when there is that level of synergy between you and the type of work that you do and everything, it just becomes so much easier. But yeah.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. Spot on. It looks like we've got about a little less than 5 minutes left. So just to kind of wrap up, like in conclusion, I think it's safe to say that it might be a new normal to see more people exploring the option of starting a side hustle, especially in this economy, when you go paycheck to paycheck and all of a sudden there's an announcement saying your pay is being cut in half, and when you lose your job and so on, and at a moment's notice, your life is turned upside down, and we could be seeing more side hustles being started and more individuals exploring side hustles. So to wrap up our conversation, what can employers do to embrace this, or to be prepared for it? What can they do from their end? What kind of a framework, or what kind of policies, or what kind of an approach should they take? And then from an individual standpoint, from this point onwards, imagine my friend was right in front of you, and I asked, hey, what next? From this point onwards, feel I don't know, this stressed or this worried with the whole pandemic. And when you look at your savings, and I've read some really tremendously horrible stories on social media where people don't have savings, and especially in the US, I've seen statistics about individuals not having a month's worth of and with healthcare costs going up and all of those things, people are now starting to think, hey, maybe I should start to save, but then more income would mean more savings. So advice for employers moving forward, new normal, how to approach, how to embrace it. Individuals who are thinking about starting a side hustle, keeping them at the back of your mind, what should they do? So there are like two questions in there.
I think the easiest way to, and this is a little bit of a cheeky answer as well, the easiest way to do it, both from the employer side and the employee side, is be radically open-minded, because things are going to change. What I say today doesn't matter, because that too will change. Just figure out how you can make your business be the most dynamic it can, to be open to like feedback internally and externally. And I think the rest will follow as long as you're open to change. You should be fine.
And I think what we've seen from a global pandemic is things are not what we thought they are in a lot of ways. Some people thought they had the security of their job that now do not have a job. Some companies thought that we can't have our employees working from home because they're not going to be productive, and the data actually says they're more productive. So things, I agree with Monica that you have to be open, because work has changed, businesses have changed, our way of life has changed, and we're still not out of it. It's still ongoing. So we still haven't even fully seen the changes. We're going to feel the impact of this for years to come. So those that are open and that are willing to have those conversations and really willing to say that, hey, maybe what I thought wasn't what I thought, let's try something else. Those are the companies that are going to make it through this. Companies such as, it's yet to be seen, but companies such as Twitter that said, hey, you guys can stay home forever if you want to stay home forever, and let's just see how this works out. So you have to be open to what's going on. And then as far as the employee's perspective, the person that is doing the side hustle, the amazing thing is that we're all interconnected. The internet connects all of us. With over 4 billion daily users, the opportunity to get exposure and learn about a side hustle is more. You can take courses and training like this, and you can learn more about your side hustle. So you don't have to go into it uneducated. You can educate yourself and have more knowledge. You also have the opportunity to get clients and customers because, again, everybody's connected. So there's a lot of good news on both sides of the coin, but I think it's having those open conversations and both sides being willing to adjust when needed.
Sure. Thank you for that. Really well put, and once again, thank you, Bhanuka, as well for bringing this wonderful discussion to a close. Well, with that said, I'm afraid we're out of time. First of all, again, thank you, Bhanuka, thank you, Kimansi, thank you for being with us here today. It's been a pleasure, and a special thank you goes out to probably not the nicest guy I know, Ashik, the Luminary team, and to our audience who tuned in today. Next week, we'll be speaking to Selena Pires, an attorney at law and business development director at Celine. We'll be speaking to Shirendra Lawrence, the COO at MAS, and Rajita Karyavasan, who is a managing director at Haycard PLC and a director at Haley's PLC. And we'll be discussing about success in business. Is it down to luck or strategy? So don't forget to tune in next week. I am Varun Chandramohan. Thank you for joining us today. See you next Saturday.
Thanks a lot. It's been an amazing experience. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day ahead.